Welcome to the channel. I'm Tom, this is my table, and on my table today we have the Intel budget PC that we put together a few months ago, but it is missing the Intel A770, and that's because, as you may have noticed, I have an RTX 4090 that's the size of a small child. So today we're going to be having a look at three things really. Can an i3-12100f handle the most powerful graphics card in the world in 4K gaming? Can you get away with using a 700 watt power supply with an RTX 4090? And finally, what spending 99% of your PC budget on a GPU looks like. But first, a word from today's sponsor. Wait, there is no sponsor. Okay, but seriously, type yes or no in the comments if this absolute unit will fit inside this case in 3, 2, 1. No. Right then, so this is probably one of the most jank setups you'll see out there, and now to see if it works. Well, the answer is yes. Right then, so here we are on F1 2022 at 4K with the max preset with ray tracing and everything like that turned on. And right off the bat, we're at 99% GPU utilization. And I'm laughing a little bit because I'm actually really surprised that the i3 is actually using the GPU fully. So yeah, quite interesting. We're not really having a look at the performance because we know the GPU can absolutely destroy it. We're just having really a look at the percentage utilization in the top left and just making sure that it's above 80%, because that's what you want really when you put in a CPU with a GPU. You want at least 80% utilization. And anything lower than that, you really do have a bottleneck with the CPU basically. So yeah, I'm actually really surprised. I will say wattage wise as well, since we are in a 700 watt power supply, 420-ish watts on the GPU, and on the CPU we're below like 30 watts. So to be honest, if you did have a power supply that is below the recommended specs for the 4090, yeah, you can get away with it, providing that you do have a low powered CPU like this one. So yeah, I'm actually really surprised. So now that we've done one lap on F1 2022, let's move on to another game. For our next game then, we are on Total War Warhammer 3, and we are on the Ultra preset at 4K. And as you can see, it's 100% GPU utilization and around 50% CPU utilization again. So it's some really impressive stuff. Watts-wise for the GPU, we're pulling just under 400 watts. So we are being a bit more efficient than on F1 2022, about 40 watts more efficient, I would say. But the big story is that the i3-12100f is keeping up with the RTX 4090. Now, I know that with previous GPUs, it's always been the case that at 4K, it just doesn't really matter what CPU you use, as long as it's not completely irrelevant and ancient. It should be a good job. But I have seen that a lot of people were using the new 7000 series Ryzen CPUs and a lot of the new Intel CPUs, and I was seeing that their GPU utilization wasn't quite up to scratch. So some of the lower end CPUs of the newer generations were struggling. But yeah, I'm not seeing that so far. So it's looking really promising. You can buy an RTX 4090 and pair it with a sub $100, sub £100 CPU. It seems so far. So let's move on to our next game. In Cyberpunk 2077 then, and we are at the Ultra preset, the Ultra Ray Tracing preset at 4K. And again, we're seeing very good GPU utilization. So let's get on our bike and see what's going on. This seems to have a much higher CPU utilization. We're up in the 70s and sometimes it's peaking into the 80s or 90s. But again, the GPU utilization staying pretty much stuck at 90%. So that is interesting. Now we're going to go out of town a little bit. So let's go back in. And again, it's just really, really impressive. Wattage wise, we're using probably the most so far, about 420, 430. So I would say it's roughly about F1 2022 levels, but maybe slightly more. And yeah, this is just some really impressive stuff from the small i3. But there is one thing I did want to try. I did want to try using DLSS, which would make the game technically render at a lower resolution, and I do just want to see how the i3 would hold up with that. So let's just do that now. Right then, so now we have DLSS on quality, and as you can see, the GPU utilization has gone down just slightly. It's actually quite a bit, or quite a fair bit. So we've lost about 20%. The CPU utilization, that has shot right up, and now it's right into the 90s. And this isn't really rendering at a super low resolution. It's pretty high. It's just above 2K resolution, I'd say, or around that. So yeah, this is where you probably see the limitations of using a RTX 4090 on an i3. But it is still very much playable. The FPS did increase, but not that much. It's probably gone up only by about 10 FPS. So I would say maybe DLSS is where you're going to see your limitation on the RTX 4090 paired with a i3. But yeah, let's move on to our next game. So we're here in Red Dead Redemption 2, a game recommended to me by a few of you in the comments in previous videos where there's been benchmarks. And yeah, I've played about 2 hours of the game, quite enjoying it so far. But here in the benchmark runs, and yeah, it's not doing too badly. The first sort of benchmarks of just sort of the scenery and that, it was at 100% utilization pretty much. But here in the city, especially in the indoors section, it dropped to about 70, around about that. And with this game in particular, you can see that the CPU is working a lot harder. It is in the 90s, almost 100% utilization. And you can see that the GPU is fluctuating between the 90s and the high 60s in terms of its utilization. So this is probably the first game that we've tested that you are seeing a bit of a bottleneck with the i3-12100f. Power-wise with this though, since we are using, it is fluctuating a lot with the utilization, we're seeing around 350, so the lowest power consumption so far of any game. I will mention it is on the Ultra preset with the slider all the way up on like max favor quality. For our final game today, we are on Hogwarts Legacy, and so far so good. The GPU utilization is pretty much maxed out, but I have been running around a little bit and it has dropped to around the high 60s in certain instances, only for a second or two. But yeah, it's playing pretty well. We do also have the CPU utilization around the 50s like a lot of the other games. So yeah, not really doing too badly. This game has just recently got a patch a few days ago, and this is the first time I've played it since. And performance does seem like it is probably better than it has been. Just because when I was playing it before, frame rate wasn't as high as this, and I did have frame generation turned on. So yeah, it does look like the performance has got a little bit better after the patch. And the i3-12100f is handling it fairly well again. So yeah, it's really, really impressive. Hogwarts is one of the areas that's a little bit hard to run, not as difficult as Hogsmeade, so I guess we could go have a quick look over there. But we're not really testing the performance of Hogwarts Legacy, we're just seeing how well the i3 does. And as you can see at this point, it's dropped down to the 70s, but then bouncing back up to the 90s, 80s. So it is a little bit more over the place than some of the other games. But yeah, it's still not doing too badly at all. Here we are in Hogsmeade, and again, performance has definitely seen a bit of an increase. I can actually hit, we can stay in around the 60s here in Hogsmeade, whereas pre-patch with a 4090, you're seeing about 40 frames a second without any DLSS or frame generation turned on. This is on the Ultra preset with ray tracing on Ultra, everything on. And in Hogsmeade though, still GPU utilization is quite low, around the 60s, 70s, peaking into the 80% usage, and CPU utilization has increased. But yeah, overall, I would say it's still not bad. It's a bit hard to judge with this title because it still is not very well optimized. Right then, to finish up, I was just going to say that I think the performance of the i3-12100f has been quite shocking, really impressive actually. So yeah, if you do just want a game at 4K with a 4090, all you need is an i3, it turns out. So let me know what you thought of this, and that's going to be all from me. Bye! He has turned into a chicken.